I am Amanda, 38 years old, and an interior designer from Boston. My life shattered when my sister Heather betrayed me by stealing my wealthy fiancé Bradley. 10 years later, at our mother's funeral, we finally came face to face again. Heather looked me up and down before mockingly asking about my love life. When I introduced her to my husband, she turned ghostly pale. The look on her face was worth the decade of pain. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that subscribe button and like this video to support more real-life stories like mine. Growing up with Heather was never easy. Despite being 3 years younger than me, she always managed to turn everything into a competition. From grades to boyfriends, clothes to friends, Heather wanted what I had, simply because it was mine. Our parents tried to mediate, but their efforts only seemed to fuel her competitive spirit. Mom would say, "Girls, there's enough love for both of you," but Heather interpreted that as a challenge to win more of that love for herself. After college, I threw myself into building my career in interior design. I was determined to make a name for myself without riding on anyone's coattails. The early years were brutal. I worked 14-hour days at Berkshire Designs, one of Boston's most prestigious firms. My apartment was tiny, my bank account even smaller, but my dreams were enormous. By 27, I had finally started to gain recognition for my work designing spaces for some of Boston's elite. That's when I met Bradley. I was overseeing the decoration for the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, arranging floral centerpieces when he approached me. Tall, with perfect teeth and confidence that filled the room, Bradley Crawford introduced himself as one of the event sponsors. "That arrangement is stunning," he said, gesturing to the centerpiece I was adjusting. "Almost as stunning as the woman creating it." Cheesy? Absolutely. But the way his blue eyes crinkled when he smiled made my heart flutter anyway. Bradley was 32, a successful real estate developer from old Boston money, who had doubled his family's fortune through smart investments and development projects. He was the full package: intelligent, ambitious, charming, and undeniably handsome. Our first date was at Sorellina, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Boston. I remember feeling out of place until Bradley made me laugh by confessing he had practiced the wine selection process with his assistant beforehand. That vulnerability beneath his polished exterior drew me in further. The romance was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to New York for Broadway shows, surprise picnics with food from my favorite childhood restaurant that he had specially delivered. Bradley remembered details about my life that even my closest friends forgot. When I mentioned once that I had always wanted to see the Northern Lights, he planned a surprise trip to Iceland 3 months later. 18 months into our relationship, Bradley proposed during a sunset dinner on the beach in the Maldives. The ring was spectacular, a family heirloom diamond reset in a modern platinum setting. Through happy tears, I said yes already, imagining our life together. We booked the Boston Harbor Hotel for the following June, 16 months away. I found my dream dress at a boutique in New York, a sleek silhouette with delicate beading that made me feel like royalty. My college roommate Patricia agreed to be my maid of honor, and my 3 closest work friends rounded out the bridal party. Everything was falling into place. Then came the family dinner where I would introduce Bradley to my parents and Heather. I was nervous but excited, wanting the people I loved most to connect. Mom prepared her famous pot roast, Dad opened his special occasion. Wine, and even Heather seemed to be on her best behavior. At first, everything went perfectly. Bradley charmed my parents with stories about his charitable foundation and complimented my mother's cooking with genuine enthusiasm. Dad, normally reserved with my boyfriends, was laughing at Bradley's jokes and discussing the Red Sox season. I should have noticed how Heather's eyes never left Bradley throughout dinner. I should have seen the way she touched her hair more often, laughed more loudly at his jokes, leaned in when he spoke. I should have recognized the danger when she insisted on showing him our childhood photos after dinner, her arm brushing against his as they flipped through albums. When Bradley excused himself to take a business call, Heather followed me into the kitchen with a barrage of questions. How much did he make? What kind of car did he drive? Had I seen his house yet? Was that ring really from Tiffany? At the time, I interpreted her interest as excitement for me. Looking back, she was taking inventory of a man she had already decided would be hers. In the following weeks, Heather frequently texted me asking about Bradley. She wanted restaurant recommendations from him for a date she had planned. She needed advice about investing the small inheritance from our grandmother. She wondered if Bradley could help her friend with a real estate question. Each request created another opportunity for them to connect without me. I was blind to it all. I was planning my dream wedding to a man I adored, advancing in my career, and finally feeling like my life was coming together. Bradley seemed equally invested, joining me for venue visits and cake tastings, offering opinions on invitation designs, and even researching honeymoon destinations that would combine his love of adventure with my preference for luxury. The red flags were there waving frantically in front of me, but happiness had rendered me colorblind to danger. When Bradley started mentioning Heather in conversation, I was pleased my fiancé and sister were getting along. When he occasionally took longer to respond to my texts, I assumed he was busy with work. When Heather started showing up at restaurants where we were dining, claiming coincidence, I believed her. I was building a future on shifting sand, too enamored with the palace I envisioned to notice the foundation crumbling beneath my feet. 6 months before our wedding, I decided to surprise Bradley with lunch at his downtown office. I had just secured a major new client and wanted to celebrate with the man I loved. The receptionist at his building smiled knowingly when I mentioned the surprise, even helping me bypass security with a visitor pass. When I knocked on his office door and heard no response, I assumed he might be in the bathroom or stepping out briefly. The door was unlocked, so I entered planning to wait for him inside. What I found destroyed my world in an instant. Bradley and Heather were tangled together on his leather office couch, so engrossed in each other they didn't notice me until I dropped the bag of takeout food. The sound of containers hitting the floor finally broke their bubble. Bradley jumped up, frantically buttoning his shirt. "This isn't what it looks like." Heather was calmer, almost smug as she smoothed her skirt. "Well, I guess now you know." The next few minutes remain a blur in my memory. Bradley claiming it just happened as though an ongoing affair was some random accident. Heather standing behind him, her hand possessively on his shoulder. How long I managed to ask, my voice unrecognizable even to myself. Bradley looked at the floor. "A few months." 4 months, Heather clarified, her precision, like a knife twist, since the night of your parents' anniversary party. The night Bradley had claimed food poisoning and couldn't attend. The night Heather had also canceled last minute, saying she had a migraine. "You were always too boring for him anyway," Heather continued, her words dripping with venom. "Too focused on your little design projects. Bradley needs someone who understands his world, who can be the right kind of partner." I looked at Bradley, waiting for him to defend me, to contradict her. His silence was my answer. With shaking hands, I removed the engagement ring and placed it on his desk. "I hope you'll be very happy together," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You deserve each other." Walking out of that building was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every step felt like moving through concrete, my body physically resisting the knowledge that my life as I knew it was over. The aftermath was brutal. I had to call the Boston Harbor Hotel and cancel our booking, forfeiting the substantial deposit. I had to contact 160 guests and explain that the wedding was off. Some friends demanded details. Others diplomatically avoided mentioning it. A few, including Patricia, stood firmly by my side, helping me pack away the wedding items I had already collected, and accompanying me to return the dress I would never wear. The social fallout was equally painful. Friends who knew both of us found themselves in an awkward position, many eventually drifting toward the more dramatic narrative that Heather and Bradley were spinning, that they had fallen in love, despite trying to fight their feelings, that they never meant to hurt me, that some connections were just too powerful to deny. My parents were horrified by Heather's betrayal, but caught in an impossible situation. Mom cried for days, torn between her daughters. Dad refused to speak to Bradley but couldn't bring himself to fully cut off Heather. Family dinners became tense affairs with carefully avoided topics and painfully polite conversation. Heather showed no remorse. Instead, she flaunted her new relationship, posting pictures with Bradley on Instagram and Facebook, making sure to tag mutual friends who would ensure I saw them. Weekend trips to his beach house. Charity galas, where she wore designer gowns. A European vacation, where they posed in front of every landmark I had once told Bradley I dreamed of seeing. The final breaking point came at Easter dinner 3 months after the discovery. I had reluctantly agreed to attend, hoping time might have softened the jagged edges of betrayal. Instead, Heather arrived wearing a massive diamond ring, Bradley in tow. "We have an announcement," she said, before the food was even served. "Bradley and I are engaged." The ring was unmistakable, the same family heirloom that had once adorned my finger, now resized for my sister's hand. Mom dropped a serving dish, shattering it on the dining room floor. Dad stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. I remained seated numb, beyond feeling as Heather detailed their plans for a December wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York, more extravagant than anything Bradley and I had planned. Throughout her monologue, Bradley stared at his plate, speaking only when directly addressed. That night, I made my decision. I would cut contact with both of them and limit my interaction with my parents as long as they maintained a relationship with Heather. Mom called daily for weeks, begging me to reconsider, insisting that family should stick together despite everything. But some betrayals cut too deep for platitudes about forgiveness. 6 months after the Easter dinner disaster, an ivory envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was an invitation to Heather and Bradley's wedding, my name written in elaborate calligraphy. The invitation felt less like an olive branch and more like a victory lap, Heather's final proof that she had won. I declined without response and booked a one-way ticket to Chicago the following week. I needed distance, not just from Heather and Bradley, but from the pitying glances of colleagues who had watched my humiliation play out in real time, from the Boston social scene, where I was now known as the woman whose fiancé left her for her sister, from every restaurant and park and street corner that held memories of a love that had proven false. Mom tried one last time to mend the rift, showing up at my apartment the night before my flight. "Please don't go," she pleaded, her eyes red from crying. "We can work through this as a family." "There is no family to work through this with," I replied, continuing to pack my suitcase. "Heather made her choice. You and Dad made yours by accepting them together. Now I'm making mine. We didn't accept them. We're just trying not to lose both our daughters." "Well, congratulations," I said, zipping the suitcase closed. "You've lost me anyway." I left Boston the next morning, watching the skyline disappear through the airplane window, wondering if I would ever return. Chicago welcomed me with its brisk winds and unfamiliar streets, a city where nobody knew my story or pitied my broken engagement. I found a tiny studio apartment in Wicker Park charming, but a significant downgrade from my Boston place. My savings covered the security deposit and first month's rent, but I would need to find work quickly. I landed a position at Hudson Design Associates, several steps down from my senior role in Boston. At 30, I was starting over as a junior designer, earning half my previous salary, and doing grunt work I had graduated from years earlier. My new co-workers were mostly fresh out of college, their enthusiasm for color swatches and fabric samples reminding me of my own early days in the field. The first 3 months in Chicago, I barely existed. I went to work, came home, ordered takeout, and fell asleep watching mindless television. My phone rarely rang except for Mom's weekly calls, which I often let go to voicemail. The pain of betrayal had morphed into a heavy numbness that made even basic tasks feel overwhelming. "You're experiencing situational depression," explained Dr. Rachel Marshall during our first therapy session. "Your brain is processing multiple losses simultaneously: your fiancé, your sister, your family unit, your job status, your home city. It's natural to feel paralyzed." Weekly therapy became my lifeline. Dr. Marshall helped me understand that the depth of my pain reflected the depth of my capacity for love and loyalty, qualities I shouldn't lose despite Heather and Bradley's actions. She guided me through exercises to process my anger and gradually rebuild my sense of self. "Your sister and ex-fiancé are living rent-free in your head," she said during one breakthrough session. "Every minute you spend thinking about them is a minute you're not investing in your own happiness." Slowly, I began to re-engage with life. I volunteered to help with a challenging commercial project at work, reminding my new employers of my capabilities. I explored Chicago neighborhoods on weekends, discovering coffee shops and bookstores that became my new haunts. I joined a gym, not because I wanted to show Bradley what he was missing, as one well-meaning friend suggested, but because the physical exertion helped quiet my mind. 6 months into my Chicago life, a mutual friend from Boston visited and inevitably brought up Heather and Bradley. "They're having problems, you know," she said over brunch, clearly expecting me to be pleased. "Bradley works constantly, and Heather spends money faster than he can make it. Everyone says they fight all the time." To my surprise, I felt nothing. No satisfaction at their troubles, no residual pain at the mention of their names. I changed the subject, asking about other friends from Boston instead. Later, I recognized that moment as significant progress, the first time I had truly felt indifferent to their lives. My career began to rebuild faster than my personal life. I distinguished myself at Hudson with innovative designs for a boutique hotel project, earning a promotion to mid-level designer within 8 months. My boss Margaret became a mentor, recognizing my experience and giving me increasingly challenging assignments. "You have a unique eye," she told me, after I completed a difficult restaurant redesign. "You see possibilities others miss." The professional validation helped restore my confidence, reminding me that Heather might have taken my fiancé, but she couldn't take my talent or work ethic. By my 1-year anniversary in Chicago, I had moved to a larger apartment in Lincoln Park and started building a small but loyal client base who specifically requested my services. Social connections came more slowly. I was guarded, reluctant to share my past or open myself to new friendships. The breakthrough came when Margaret invited me to her holiday party, where I met Sarah and Marcus, a married couple who owned a popular local bakery. Something about Sarah's straightforward manner and Marcus's quiet kindness made me feel safe enough to engage in real conversation. "You should come to our Sunday dinner next week," Sarah said as the party wound down. "Nothing fancy, just friends and food. No pressure to be interesting or tell your life story." That Sunday dinner became a weekly tradition. Through Sarah and Marcus, I met other Chicagoans who accepted me without probing about my past. Jessica, a pediatric nurse with a wicked sense of humor. Thomas, a literature professor who hosted legendary game nights. Allison and Daniel, newlyweds who were renovating a historic brownstone and eventually became my clients. Dating remained terrifying. Sarah attempted to set me up with her cousin Michael, a kind architect whose gentle demeanor couldn't penetrate my walls. Marcus introduced me to his colleague Christopher, whose enthusiastic pursuit triggered all my Bradley-related alarms. A coffee date with Robert, a doctor I met at a charity auction, ended when he casually mentioned he was technically still married but practically divorced. "Your picker is broken, Dr. Marshall said when I reported these failed attempts. "You don't trust yourself to choose wisely, so you're finding reasons to reject these men before they can reject or hurt you." We worked on identifying my trust issues and the defense mechanisms I had developed. I realized I was comparing every man to Bradley, looking for signs of similar betrayal, while simultaneously being attracted to emotionally unavailable men who presented no real risk to my heart. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a session 18 months into therapy. "Do you still hate them?" Dr. Marshall asked. "Heather and Bradley, I don't think about them much anymore." "But when you do?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't hate them. Hating them would mean they still matter to me. I just feel nothing. They're strangers who once hurt me." Dr. Marshall smiled. "That's not nothing, Amanda. That's freedom." With this new freedom, I expanded my life in Chicago. I joined a cooking class and discovered a talent for French cuisine. I found a hiking group that explored Illinois state parks on weekends. I joined a book club that met monthly at a wine bar near my apartment. I traveled to Michigan's beautiful shoreline with my new friends, discovering the beauty of the Great Lakes. Through it all, I maintained limited contact with my parents. Dad and I spoke more frequently than Mom, and I did our conversations focused on neutral topics, like his woodworking hobby or my latest design projects. Mom tried repeatedly to broker peace between Heather and me, until I finally established a firm boundary. "I don't want updates about Heather," I told her, during a brief visit to Chicago. "I don't wish her ill, but she's not part of my life anymore." "But she's your sister," Mom protested. "Biology made her my sister. Her choices made her a stranger." Mom eventually stopped mentioning Heather directly, though she occasionally slipped in references to the beautiful home Heather and Bradley had purchased or their trips to exotic locations. Each time I gently changed the subject, and gradually those references stopped too. 3 years after leaving Boston, I realized something profound while walking along Lake Michigan one crisp fall morning. The mention of Heather and Bradley no longer brought pain. Their betrayal had led me to Chicago, to new friends, to professional growth, to a stronger version of myself. For the first time, I felt genuine gratitude for the path my life had taken, detours and all. 4 years into my Chicago life, everything changed again, when Margaret assigned me to collaborate with Kingsley Architects on a luxury lakefront development. "You'll work directly with Nathan Kingsley," she explained. "He's brilliant but particular about design integration. Keep him happy, Amanda. This project could put us on the national map." I expected Nathan Kingsley to be another egotistical architect, the type who viewed interior designers as mere decorators, rather than creative partners. Our first meeting was scheduled at the construction site, an abandoned warehouse being transformed into multi-million-dollar condominiums. I arrived early, notebook in hand, professional and prepared. A tall man in a hard hat was studying blueprints near the entrance, his back to me as I approached. "Excuse me," I called out. "I'm looking for Nathan Kingsley." He turned, and I was struck by his thoughtful gray eyes and the quiet confidence in his stance. No designer suit or pretentious accessories, just worn jeans and a simple button down under his safety vest. "You found him," he said, extending his hand. "You must be Amanda Reynolds from Hudson." Nathan was 41, with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines that suggested a life of genuine smiles rather than practiced charm. As we toured the raw space, I was impressed by his vision and the considerate way he explained structural elements without condescension. "What do you see for this space?" he asked, when we reached what would become the penthouse living room. I described my initial thoughts about honoring the industrial bones while creating warmth through layered textures and strategic lighting. Instead of immediately imposing his own vision, Nathan listened intently, asking questions that helped refine my ideas. "We think alike," he said, finally. "This could be something special." Over the following weeks, our professional relationship developed through twice-weekly meetings and daily emails. Nathan respected my expertise, incorporated my suggestions, and defended my design choices to the developers when necessary. Unlike Bradley, who had always subtly reminded me of his superior financial position, Nathan treated me as a true equal. After a particularly productive meeting solving a challenging layout issue, Nathan suggested coffee at a nearby cafe to celebrate our breakthrough. The conversation flowed easily from professional topics to personal interests. I learned he had built his firm from nothing, after growing up in a blue-collar family in Michigan. He mentioned being divorced for 6 years with no children, the marriage having ended when his ex-wife decided she didn't want the architect, just the lifestyle his career could provide. "Coffee again next week," he suggested as we parted, to discuss the material samples. These coffee meetings became a regular occurrence, gradually extending longer, as we discovered shared passions for historic architecture, obscure films, and kayaking. Nathan was easy to talk to, his communication style direct but kind, without the calculated charm that had once blinded me to Bradley's true character. 3 months into the project, Nathan asked me to dinner. Not to discuss work, he clarified. Just dinner. With me. If you'd like to. My hesitation was immediate. Workplace romances were complicated enough without my trust issues. I don't know, Nathan. We work so well together professionally. I'd hate to jeopardize that. Fair concern, he replied, no pressure in his tone. The invitation stands if you change your mind. Either way, I respect our working relationship too much to let anything affect it negatively. His response, so different from the persuasive tactics other men had used when I declined their advances, made me reconsider. A week later, I accepted his dinner invitation. Our first official date was at an interactive art installation, followed by dinner at a small Ethiopian restaurant. Nathan had remembered my casual mention of wanting to experience both. Unlike Bradley's showy displays of wealth, Nathan's thoughtfulness revealed itself in the details, the way he had researched the artist beforehand, so we could discuss the work, how he asked questions, and genuinely listened to my answers. The evening ended with a brief hug and his promise to call the next day, which he did exactly when he said he would. No games, no strategic delays, to create artificial intrigue. We began dating cautiously, my walls still high, after years of protecting my heart. Nathan never pushed for more than I was ready to give, content to let our connection develop naturally. When I canceled plans because of anxiety, or pulled back without explanation, he responded with patience rather than ultimatums. 6 months into our relationship, I finally shared the full story of Heather and Bradley's betrayal. We were at Nathan's lakeside home watching the sunset from his deck when he gently asked about my family. I have a complicated relationship with them. I began, then found myself revealing everything. The competition with Heather, Bradley's charm offensive, the devastating discovery, my escape to Chicago. Nathan listened without interruption, his hand steady in mine. When I finished, he said simply, "Thank you for trusting me with your story. What they did says everything about them, and nothing about you." His response brought tears to my eyes. No platitudes about forgiveness or silver linings, just acknowledgement of my pain and affirmation of my worth. "There's something else you should know," Nathan said after a moment. "I've worked with Bradley Crawford." My heart stuttered. "What?" 7 years ago, before I moved my business to Chicago. His company was developing a property in Boston, where my firm had been hired for the architectural design. It was brief, just a few meetings, but enough to form an impression. What impression, I asked, not sure I wanted to know. That he was competent, but cutthroat. Charming in meetings but cruel to subordinates. The type who takes credit for others' ideas and prioritizes appearance over substance. Nathan squeezed my hand. "I didn't know he was your ex until now, but knowing that explains why you're cautious with your trust. He wasn't worthy of it." Something shifted inside me that night. Nathan's unexpected connection to my past, rather than triggering old wounds, somehow helped heal them. His independent assessment of Bradley's character validated my experience and helped me trust my own judgment again. Our relationship deepened over the following year. Nathan introduced me to his family during a weekend trip to Michigan, where his parents welcomed me with genuine warmth. His sister Caroline and I bonded immediately over our shared love of vintage fashion. His nephew Alexander adopted me as his bonus aunt, proudly showing me his collection of rocks and feathers. I found myself belonging in a way I never had with Bradley's social circle, where I had always felt the need to prove my worth. With Nathan's family, I could simply be myself. As our personal relationship flourished, so did our professional collaboration. The lakefront development received rave reviews upon completion, with several design publications featuring our seamless integration of architecture and interiors. This success led to other joint projects, our complementary styles, creating spaces that neither of us could have envisioned alone. 2 years after our first coffee meeting, Nathan proposed during a private dinner at his home. No elaborate production or audience, just the two of us in the space we had come to share. "I love you, Amanda," he said, holding a simple but elegant diamond ring. Not because of what you do or how you look or what you can add to my life. I love you because of who you are, your resilience, your creativity, your kind heart, despite everything you've experienced. Will you marry me? Unlike the excited frenzy that had followed Bradley's proposal, my acceptance of Nathan's offer felt like a calm certainty, a recognition of the solid foundation we had built together. We decided on a private wedding ceremony, just 10 close friends on the shores of Lake Michigan. No family, a decision Nathan supported, without question. This day is about us, and our future, he said when I worried about excluding his parents. They'll understand. True to his word, Nathan's family respected our choice, his mother sending a heartfelt letter and family heirloom handkerchief for me to carry. The day we married was bright and clear, the lake a stunning backdrop as we exchanged simple vows. Sarah was my witness, her husband Marcus officiating. No elaborate gown or formal tuxedo, just a cream silk dress for me and a gray suit for Nathan. No lavish reception or staged photographs, just an intimate dinner with our chosen family at our favorite restaurant. It was everything my wedding to Bradley would not have been, and everything I truly wanted. The years that followed were rich with growth, both personal and professional. Nathan and I purchased land outside Chicago and designed our dream home together, a modern structure with warm interiors that showcased both our talents. I launched my own design firm, Reynolds Interiors, with Nathan's encouragement, quickly establishing a reputation for innovative residential spaces. Nathan expanded Kingsley Architects, nationally opening offices in Denver and Seattle. We balanced our careers with a personal life that included travel, friendships, and quiet evenings discussing books or planning future projects. Our marriage was built on mutual respect and genuine partnership, each supporting the other's ambitions while maintaining our connection. Throughout these happy years, I maintained my distance from my Boston past. My parents visited our Chicago home occasionally, these visits becoming less strained as time passed. They respected my boundaries regarding Heather, never bringing her or Bradley up directly, though I sometimes caught Mom looking at wedding photos with a sad expression, clearly thinking about her absent daughter. 5 years into our marriage, Nathan's firm acquired a struggling architectural company in Boston, expanding Kingsley Architects to the East Coast. The irony wasn't lost on me when Nathan mentioned the acquisition included taking over several of Bradley's development contracts. His company has been mismanaged for years, Nathan explained. He's overextended and losing projects to competitors. Our Boston office will need to clean up quite a mess. I felt no satisfaction in Bradley's professional troubles, only appreciation for how different my life had become. Nathan and I had built something genuine together, a relationship that didn't require constant validation or materialistic displays to sustain it. We agreed not to disclose our marriage to Bradley during business negotiations, not out of secrecy, but because our personal lives were irrelevant to professional matters. Nathan would handle the Boston office, primarily through his newly appointed regional director, limiting his own travel to quarterly visits. Neither of us could have predicted how this business expansion would eventually bring my past and present into direct collision. The call came on a Tuesday morning, as I reviewed fabric samples in my office. Dad's number flashing on my phone screen was unusual enough to cause immediate concern. He rarely called during work hours. Amanda. His voice sounded strange, thin, and shaky. Your mother's in the hospital. It's cancer spread throughout her lymphatic system. The doctors say it's advanced. She's asking for you. The world tilted sideways. Mom and I had our difficulties, especially regarding Heather, but she was still my mother, the woman who had taught me to draw, who had held me through childhood nightmares, who had supported my decision to pursue design, when others suggested more practical careers. I'll be there tonight, I promised, already pulling up flight information on my computer. Nathan immediately cleared his schedule when I called him, insisting on accompanying me. You don't have to face this alone, he said, but I gently declined. I need to do this part myself first, I explained. But knowing you're here makes everything easier. 6 hours later, I stood in the sterile hallway of Massachusetts General Hospital, gathering courage before entering my mother's room. She looked smaller than I remembered, her vibrant energy diminished by illness and treatment. Still, her face brightened when she saw me. "You came," she whispered, extending a hand marked with ivy bruises. "Of course I came," I replied, carefully embracing her. "I'm here now." The doctors confirmed what Dad had told me. Stage 4 lymphoma, discovered only after Mom had gone to the doctor for persistent fatigue and unexplained weight loss. The cancer had spread aggressively, leaving limited treatment options. They spoke of comfort measures and quality of life rather than cure. That night, as Dad dozed in the recliner beside Mom's bed, she squeezed my hand to get my attention. "I have regrets, Amanda," she said, her voice barely audible. "About Heather, about not standing up for you more." "Mom, you don't need to." She interrupted with surprising firmness. "I do need to. I was weak. I told myself I couldn't choose between my daughters, but in not choosing, I let you both down. I should have held Heather accountable." Tears burned behind my eyes. "It wasn't your betrayal." "No, but I betrayed you in a different way, by trying to remain neutral when what happened was clearly wrong." She paused, gathering strength. "I've called Heather, asked her to come while I'm still strong enough for a conversation. I want peace between you two before I'm gone." Panic flared in my chest. "Mom, I don't think." "Please," she said, her fingers tightening around mine. "For me, just be civil. That's all I ask." How could I deny a dying woman such a simple request? I nodded, though everything in me wanted to flee back to Chicago, back to the life I had carefully constructed away from Heather's destructive presence. Heather arrived the following afternoon, dramatic as always in designer clothes that seemed inappropriate for a hospital visit. She air-kissed Mom's cheek, careful not to disturb the medical equipment, then acknowledged me with a tight nod. "Amanda, you look healthy." The conversation that followed was excruciating in its forced politeness. We discussed Mom's treatment options, the hospital food, the weather, everything except the betrayal that had severed our relationship a decade earlier. Mom watched us with sad eyes, clearly seeing through our performance. When Dad took Mom for a scheduled scan, Heather and I were left alone in uncomfortable silence. So she finally said, "Chicago treating you well?" "Very well. I have my own design firm now." "Good for you." Her tone made it clear she considered this a consolation prize for losing Bradley. "We just renovated our place in Beacon Hill, 6,000 square feet private garden. Bradley hired some New York designer. Cost a fortune but worth every penny." I simply nodded, unwilling to engage in her status competition. "How is Bradley?" Something flickered across her face. "Busy. Always working. You know how ambitious he is." Before I could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and quickly rejected the call. Within seconds, it rang again. This time she answered with a sharp, "I told you not to call right now," before stepping into the hallway. When she returned, her composure had slipped slightly. "Work emergency," she explained, though I hadn't asked. "Bradley's assistant can't handle anything without supervision." The pattern repeated over the next several days. Heather appeared at the hospital for brief, tense visits, always impeccably dressed, always emphasizing her wealthy lifestyle, but increasingly distracted by calls she either avoided or took in hushed, angry tones away from Mom's room. Mom's condition deteriorated rapidly. The cancer was aggressive, outpacing even the palliative treatments. A week after my arrival, her doctor suggested moving her to hospice care. "How long?" Dad asked, his voice breaking. "Days, possibly a week or two," the doctor replied gently. "It's time to say goodbye." We moved Mom to a peaceful hospice facility, with gardens visible from her window. Dad barely left her side while I coordinated with the staff and handled paperwork. Heather made brief appearances, always with excuses about why she couldn't stay longer. The night Mom died, I was alone with her. Dad had finally succumbed to exhaustion and was sleeping in the family waiting room. Heather had promised to relieve me at 8 but called to say she was running late, something about Bradley needing her at some event. Mom hadn't spoken all day, but as the monitor showed her heart rate slowing, she suddenly opened her eyes and looked directly at me. "Forgive," she whispered. "Not for her. For you." Those were her last words. She slipped away peacefully while I held her hand, telling her I loved her, and that it was okay to let go. Heather arrived 30 minutes after Mom passed, smelling of wine and wearing an evening gown under her coat. When I told her she was too late, she collapsed in theatrical sobs that seemed more performance than genuine grief. The following days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and legal details. Dad, lost in his grief, relied heavily on me to make decisions. Heather, meanwhile, had strong opinions about everything from the casket to the flower arrangements. Mom would want the premium package, she insisted, at the funeral home. The mahogany casket with silver handles. Mom specifically said she wanted to be cremated, I countered, producing the advance directive Mom had signed years earlier. "That's ridiculous. The Crawfords always have proper burials. Bradley's family will expect it." "This isn't about the Crawfords or their expectations. This is about Mom's wishes." Similar arguments erupted over the memorial service. Heather wanted an elaborate affair at the most expensive venue in Boston. I advocated for the simple garden gathering Mom had described to me during one of our hospital conversations. Dad finally intervened. "Enough. Your mother wanted a peaceful service in the garden of her church. That's what we're doing. Amanda will handle the arrangements, since she actually listened to what your mother wanted." Heather stormed out, only to return hours later, with Bradley in tow, both acting as though the argument had never happened. As the funeral approached, I found myself increasingly needing Nathan's steady presence. We spoke nightly on video calls, his calm support helping me navigate the emotional minefield of family grief complicated by old betrayals. "I should be there with you," he said the night before the funeral. "Maybe you should," I admitted, finally ready to have my husband by my side. "Can you make it by tomorrow?" "I'll be on the first flight out. Text me the service details." "There's something else you should know," I added, realizing I needed to prepare him. "Bradley will be there, Heather's husband." Nathan's expression didn't change. I figured as much. "Don't worry about me, Amanda. I'm coming to support you, not to create drama." The knowledge that Nathan would soon be with me gave me strength to face the difficult day ahead. We agreed he would meet me at the hotel, rather than the service itself, giving me space to focus on family obligations before introducing my husband into the volatile mix. Little did I know how dramatically his presence would change the dynamics of my final confrontation with Heather. The morning of Mom's funeral dawned clear and cool, a perfect New England autumn day. I helped Dad with his tie, his fingers too shaky to manage the knot himself. Though gray and diminished by grief, he stood tall in his best suit, determined to honor Mom with dignity. "She was so proud of you, Amanda," he said as we prepared to leave. "She told me that often, especially after seeing your work featured in that design magazine last year." The revelation that Mom had followed my career from afar brought fresh tears. I had maintained such strict boundaries that I hadn't realized she still kept tabs on my accomplishments. We arrived at the church garden early to greet guests. Dad stood beside me accepting condolences with quiet grace. Friends from Mom's book club, neighbors from the street where I grew up, colleagues from her years teaching elementary school all shared stories of her kindness and quiet strength. Heather and Bradley arrived 15 minutes after the scheduled start time, creating a small commotion as they walked through the garden. Heather wore an ostentatious black designer dress, with impractical heels that sank into the lawn with each step. Bradley, now showing signs of middle age with a slightly thickened waistline and thinning hair, followed behind her, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. The service itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Mom's favorite classical music played softly as friends and family shared memories. When my turn came to speak, I focused on Mom's creativity, her passion for teaching, her ability to find beauty in ordinary moments. Heather's eulogy, by contrast, seemed more about establishing her own importance in Mom's life than about Mom herself. After the final blessing, we proceeded to the cemetery for a private family interment of Mom's ashes. Heather dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief while checking her phone. Bradley disappeared twice to take calls, returning with terse apologies about urgent business matters. The reception was held at my parents' home now. Just Dad's home. I had arranged a simple but elegant spread from Mom's favorite local caterer with her cherished china and crystal, set out in the dining room. Heather immediately criticized the food selection loudly enough for the caterers to hear. Sandwiches. Seriously, Amanda, Mom deserved better than deli trays. I bit back a sharp retort, reminding myself of Mom's final request for peace. These are from Bellini's, Mom's favorite. Well, Bradley and I had our anniversary dinner catered by Chef Anton last month. He trained under Gordon Ramsay, you know. I could have arranged something much more appropriate. Throughout the reception, Heather continued her performance of the grieving yet sophisticated daughter. She made a point of mentioning their recent vacation to Bali, the renovations to their summer home, Bradley's new sports car. With each expensive reference, her voice grew louder, ensuring nearby guests would overhear. Bradley, meanwhile, seemed distracted and uncomfortable. He kept checking his watch and stepping outside for phone calls each time, returning looking more stressed. Once I overheard a fragment of conversation through an open window. Tell them I need more time. The bank can't just... Listen, just stall them until next week. As the afternoon progressed, I noticed Dad speaking with elderly relatives in the living room, leaving me to manage the reception details. I was arranging a fresh tray of Mom's favorite cookies when Heather approached, wineglass in hand. It wasn't her first, judging by her slightly loosened inhibitions. So she said, looking me up and down critically. Still the dutiful daughter, even after everything. Always trying to be perfect, aren't you? I continued arranging cookies. I'm just honoring Mom the way she would have wanted. Please. You're putting on a show trying to make me look bad. She sipped her wine, leaving a red stain on the glass. You know what Mom told me once? That she worried about you being so inflexible, so unable to adapt. I guess she was right, since you're still alone after all these years. The comment stung, but I refused to show it. We all grieve differently, Heather. It's not grief I'm talking about. It's life. Look at you, Amanda. 38. And what do you have to show for it? A tiny design business in Chicago. A rented apartment. She glanced around to ensure others could hear. Poor you, still single at 38. Meanwhile, look at my husband. Handsome, rich, and happy. The last word rang false given Bradley's obvious stress all day. But Heather was too invested in her narrative to notice. I took a deep breath, remembering Nathan's imminent arrival. Actually, I'm not single. Heather's eyebrows shot up. Oh, where is this mystery man then? Or did you invent him for the occasion? Her laugh was brittle. Let me guess, he couldn't make it. How convenient. He's arriving soon. He had business in Chicago this morning. Right, Heather said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Your imaginary boyfriend is just running late. Creative as always, Amanda. Not boyfriend. Husband. I twisted my wedding ring, which I'd kept turned inward all day to avoid questions until Nathan arrived. We've been married for 5 years. Heather's smile faltered briefly before returning with forced brightness. You're making that up. No way you got married without telling the family. I did, actually. I spotted Nathan entering through the front door, his tall figure instantly recognizable. My heart lightened at the sight of him. In fact, here he is now. Let me introduce you. I raised my hand slightly, catching Nathan's eye. He smiled warmly and made his way toward us through the crowd of mourners. Nathan, I called. Come meet my sister. As Nathan approached, I watched Heather's expression transform from skepticism to shock. The wineglass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. She recognized him immediately, her face draining of color. Heather, this is my husband, Nathan Kingsley. Nathan, my sister, Heather Crawford. Nathan extended his hand professionally. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. Heather stared at his outstretched hand as though it might bite her. Kingsley. As in Kingsley Architects. That's right, Nathan confirmed. I believe we have a meeting scheduled next week regarding the waterfront project. Your husband's company is one of the developers we're working with since our acquisition of Boston Heritage Architects. Before Heather could respond, Bradley appeared beside her, alerted by the commotion of the broken glass. He froze when he saw Nathan, recognition and alarm crossing his face. Kingsley, he said, his voice strained. What are you doing here? Supporting my wife at her mother's funeral, Nathan replied simply. I was just explaining to Heather that our companies have some business to discuss next week. Bradley looked from Nathan to me, and back again, the implications slowly dawning on him. Your wife, Amanda, is your wife. Nathan slipped his arm around my waist. Going on 6 years now. We met in Chicago on the Lakeside Tower project. The color drained from Bradley's face, matching Heather's pallor. You never mentioned that Amanda was my wife. Nathan finished for him. It didn't seem relevant to our business discussions. Professional and personal matters should remain separate, don't you think? The double meaning wasn't lost on Bradley, whose betrayal had thoroughly mixed the professional and personal a decade earlier. Heather found her voice, though it emerged higher than normal. How convenient that you've taken over Bradley's projects right when his company is expanding. Nathan's expression remained pleasant but professional. Actually, from what I understand, Crawford Development has been contracting rather than expanding. The Boston market can be challenging without proper financial management. The pointed comment hung in the air, confirmation of Bradley's business troubles that Heather had clearly been unaware of, judging by her shocked expression. We should talk privately, Bradley muttered to Heather, gripping her elbow. No need to leave on our account, I said calmly. Nathan and I were just about to check on my father. He's had a difficult day. As we turned to leave, Heather called after me, desperation, replacing her earlier condescension. Oh, you could have told me you were married. All these years letting Mom think you were alone. I faced her one last time. Mom knew I was happy, Heather. That's what mattered to her. Not the size of my house or the brand of my clothes or how much my husband earns. Just that I was loved and at peace. Nathan and I moved through the reception, stopping to speak with Dad, who brightened visibly upon meeting Nathan. Amanda's told me so much about you, he said, shaking Nathan's hand warmly. I'm glad she has someone steady in her life. From across the room I could see Heather and Bradley engaged in a heated, whispered argument near the kitchen door. Her gestures were becoming more animated while he kept glancing nervously in Nathan's direction. Finally they made hasty goodbyes to Dad, and departed, Heather's perfect facade crumbling, as Bradley practically pulled her toward the door. Several guests who had witnessed the confrontation gave me knowing looks or subtle thumbs-up gestures. Apparently Heather's behavior over the years had won her few genuine admirers, even among family friends. One elderly aunt approached with a conspiratorial smile. I always knew you'd land on your feet, Amanda. Your mother would have loved seeing this day. As the last guest departed, and Dad retired upstairs for a much-needed rest, Nathan and I sat together on the back porch, the same swing where Mom used to read to me as a child. You handled that with incredible grace, Nathan said, his arm around my shoulders. I had a lot of practice imagining this moment, I admitted. Though in my imagination I was much more cutting and dramatic. The reality was better. You didn't lower yourself to her level. You showed her exactly what she's missing, not just in material terms, but in integrity and genuine happiness. Under the same stars that had witnessed my childhood dreams and adult heartbreaks, I leaned against my husband's shoulder and felt the last pieces of my old wound finally heal. The circle had closed. The past had lost its power. The morning after the funeral, Nathan and I had breakfast with Dad in the sunny kitchen where I'd grown up. Between bites of Mom's treasured blueberry pancake recipe, Dad surprised me with an apology. I should have stood up for you more when everything happened with Heather and Bradley, he said, his hands cradling his coffee mug. I was trying so hard not to lose either of my daughters that I ended up letting you both down in different ways. You were in an impossible position, Dad, I replied. He shook his head. There's always a right choice, even when all the options are painful. Your mother and I should have held Heather accountable instead of trying to keep the peace at any cost. His words echoed what Mom had told me in the hospital, this belated recognition of how their well-intentioned neutrality had enabled Heather's worst behaviors. There's something else you should know, Dad continued, glancing at Nathan. Bradley's business is failing. He's over-leveraged and losing clients. Heather keeps spending as though nothing's wrong, but they've already remortgaged the house twice. Your mother worried about them constantly. The information should have brought satisfaction after Heather's cruel comments about my life, but instead, I felt a strange emptiness. My sister's unhappiness no longer brought me joy or vindication, just a sad recognition of patterns repeating. What will you do now, sir? Nathan asked Dad gently. Dad looked around the kitchen at the home he had shared with Mom for 40 years. Probably sell this place eventually. Too many rooms for just me. Maybe get a condo near my golf club. He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Visit you two in Chicago sometimes if that's all right. Anytime, Nathan and I said in unison. We spent the day helping Dad organize Mom's personal items, a process both painful and healing. I found myself telling stories about her that made us laugh through tears, memories resurfacing that had been buried beneath years of complicated family dynamics. When we boarded our flight back to Chicago that evening, I felt lighter despite the grief of losing Mom. Something had shifted fundamentally during this return to Boston, a final releasing of old pain that had lingered beneath the surface of my new life. On the plane, Nathan worked on architectural sketches, while I gazed out the window watching Boston shrink beneath us. What are you thinking about? He asked, noticing my reflection in the glass. How strange life is, I replied. 10 years ago, I left Boston heartbroken and humiliated. Now I'm leaving with sadness for Mom, but also this unexpected peace about everything else. Closure, he suggested. More than that, understanding maybe. Seeing Heather and Bradley unhappy, despite having everything they schemed for, helped me realize something important. What's that? That happiness isn't about winning or acquiring or showing off. It's about building something authentic with people who value you for yourself. Nathan set aside his sketches and took my hand. You know what I saw yesterday? Not just a woman who had built a successful life despite betrayal, but someone who had built a better life because of it. The Amanda who might have married Bradley would never have become the strong, compassionate woman I fell in love with. His words settled into my heart, illuminating a truth I had sensed but never fully articulated. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of a far better one. 2 weeks after returning to Chicago, I received a call from Dad. Heather and Bradley are separating, he said, without preamble. He's moved out. Something about financial improprieties she just discovered. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, surprised to find I meant it. She's been calling me daily, wanting to move back home temporarily. Says she can't afford their house payments on her own. I told her she could stay in the guest room until she figures things out. After we hung up, I sat in my home office looking out at the garden. Nathan and I had designed together, feeling an unexpected urge to reach out to Heather. Not from obligation or Mom's deathbed request, but from a place of genuine compassion for someone whose life choices had led to inevitable consequences. I didn't call immediately. Instead, I discussed it with my therapist, Dr. Marshall, during our monthly check-in session. Why do you want to contact her? She asked. Be honest with yourself. Not to gloat, I said after careful consideration. Maybe to offer understanding that no one else can give her right now. I know what it's like to have your life implode, to lose your partner and your sense of security simultaneously. That's remarkably generous given your history. Are you sure you're ready for whatever response she might give? I think so. Her power to hurt me is gone. I'm not the same person she betrayed, and I don't need anything from her anymore, not even an apology. The following Sunday, I called Heather at Dad's house. The conversation was initially awkward, her tone guarded and brittle. "I assume you've heard about Bradley and me," she said after minimal pleasantries. "Dad mentioned you're staying with him for a while." "Just until I figure things out." Her voice hardened. "I suppose you're thrilled that my marriage failed while yours is so perfect." "I'm not thrilled about your pain, Heather. That wouldn't honor Mom's memory or help either of us move forward." A long silence followed. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its defensive edge. "Why are you calling Amanda? What do you want?" "Nothing. I just wanted to say that I understand how it feels when the future you planned disappears overnight. It's disorienting and terrifying, but it's survivable. I learned that firsthand." Another silence, longer this time. Then, almost inaudibly, "I really thought he loved me." "I know. I thought the same once." "Do you hate me?" she asked suddenly. "No," I answered truthfully. "I did for a long time, but that's exhausting. I don't hate you. I don't know you well enough anymore to have such a strong feeling either way." "Fair enough." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "For what it's worth, which probably isn't much, I am sorry. Not just because things ended badly with Bradley, but because what we did was wrong. I was jealous of you my entire life, of how easily everything seemed to come to you." The admission surprised me. Nothing came easily, Heather. I just didn't complain about the work. We talked for nearly an hour, not solving decades of complicated history, but at least acknowledging it honestly, for perhaps the first time. Before hanging up, I gave her Dr. Marshall's information, offering to cover the therapy costs if insurance was an issue during her transition. "You don't need to do that," she said. "I want to. Not for you exactly, but for the sister I used to have before competition and resentment came between us." Over the following months, Nathan and I continued building our life together in Chicago. His company flourished, eventually acquiring several more architectural firms, including, ironically, the remains of Bradley's failed development company. My design business expanded nationally with projects in Denver, Seattle, and New York. Dad visited for Thanksgiving, bringing news that Heather had found an apartment and a job at a friend's real estate office. "She's different," he reported. "Quieter, more thoughtful. She asked about you, wanted to know if you'd be willing to talk again sometime." I agreed to occasional phone calls, which gradually became less strained. We would never be close in the conventional sense, but we established a cautious communication that would have pleased Mom. As Nathan and I approached our 7th anniversary, we began discussing starting a family, something we had previously put on hold to focus on our careers. The thought of becoming parents sparked both excitement and reflection on the family patterns we wanted to continue or change. "What worries you most about having children?" Nathan asked one evening, as we sat on our back porch watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness. "That I might inadvertently create the same competition between siblings that poisoned my relationship with Heather," I admitted. "My parents never meant to, but somehow Heather always felt she had to fight for attention or validation. Being aware of that pattern is the first step to breaking it," Nathan pointed out. "Besides, we'll make plenty of our own unique mistakes to worry about." His humor, as always, put things in perspective. We would face parenthood as we had faced everything else, with honest communication and mutual support. Looking back on the journey from heartbroken ex-fiancé to confident wife, business owner, and potential mother, I can trace how each painful step led to unexpected growth. The betrayal that once defined me became merely a chapter in a much longer, richer story. I learned that losing what you thought you wanted can sometimes lead you directly to what you truly need. I discovered that revenge fantasies pale in comparison to the satisfaction of living well. Most importantly, I found that forgiveness, offered not from obligation, but from genuine healing, liberates the forgiver far more than the forgiven. If you're facing betrayal or loss that feels insurmountable, remember that your story isn't over just taking an unexpected turn. The person you'll become through this challenge may be stronger, wiser, and more authentic than the one you were before. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest teachers if we're brave enough to learn from them. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've experienced something similar, I'd love to hear how you navigated your own journey to healing in the comments below. Please subscribe if you found value in my experience like this video, to help others find it, and share with someone who might need to hear that there is life after betrayal. Remember, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting happy.